She whispered, if you go now. You'll always wonder what if. I didn't mean to start going to the same corner cafe every morning. It just sort of happened. Habit disguised as choice. They made a decent Americano, the light through the front windows was good enough to wake me up, and the chairs didn't creak too much when you sat down for longer than you should. She was already there before me most days. Always at the table by the window, where the shadows stretched across the wood floor. She had a paperback in her hand, not a new one, the spine was cracked, and a thermos next to her that she probably filled at home but never touched. I noticed that because it was the opposite of me. I bought my coffee but never finished it. The first time we spoke, it wasn't really speaking. I was balancing my cup and my phone, almost dropped both, and she glanced up long enough to say, careful. Just that. But it came with this half-smile like she'd seen 100 people do the same thing and still found it worth pointing out. The next morning, she said, you're back. Not a question. Just noticing. And I said, yeah, like that was an answer. It became a rhythm. Small comments that weren't conversation but weren't nothing. She remembered my order before I did once, you take it black, right? And I remember nodding too quickly, like it meant more than it should. I never asked her name. She never asked mine. Maybe that's why I kept going back. There was something about the way she looked at me when the silence stretched. Not staring, not curious. Just steady, like she was giving me the choice to say something or not. And most of the time, I didn't. Loneliness has a way of filling a room even when you're not talking about it. Mine showed up in half-written texts I never sent, songs paused halfway through because they felt too heavy in my headphones. Hers showed up in the way she carried that book everywhere but only turned a few pages. One morning, the cafe was crowded and the only open seat was across from her. She tapped the chair with her finger, almost like an afterthought. You can sit here if you want. I sat down, careful with my cup. She closed the book without marking the page. You're earlier than usual, she said. And you're always here before me, I answered. My voice came out quieter than I meant. That made her smile, but she didn't laugh. Just shifted the thermos with her fingertips, turning it slowly. Her hands looked like they'd done more than just hold books. I kept folding and unfolding the edge of a napkin, not sure what to do with my hands. She noticed, of course. Nervous habit? Probably. I shrugged. Doesn't stop me from doing it. Her eyes flicked toward mine, then back down to the table. Most things don't. We stayed like that, two people pretending the silence belonged to the cafe and not between us. The noise of plates, a door opening, someone laughing too loud. But underneath, there was this pause. Like both of us were waiting for the other to move first. When I finally stood to leave, she looked up, not disappointed, not surprised, just steady again. If you go now, she said softly, you'll always wonder what if. It wasn't a challenge. More like an observation, the same way she'd said, careful, that first day. But it followed me out the door, heavier than any coffee cup. I didn't look back. Not yet. I told myself I wouldn't sit with her again. That the first time was an accident, the cafe was crowded, no seats left. Easy excuse. But a week later, when the same thing happened, I didn't even hesitate. She tapped the chair again, this time with a small shake of her head, like you knew this was coming. I sat down, trying not to look like I was waiting for something. You always write in that notebook, she said, glancing at the spiral-bound pad I carried. Do you ever finish what you start? I let out a short laugh. Not really. Mostly I just write the first line and then stare at it until it feels stupid. First lines are the hardest. She spoke like she knew. People put too much pressure on them. I flicked my eyes toward her thermos. And you? You ever drink out of that thing, or is it just for decoration? Her smile tilted. Habit. I make tea before I leave, but by the time I sit down here, I don't really want it anymore. We both laughed lightly, but the kind that fades fast. She set the thermos aside and leaned back. My daughter used to tease me about it. Said I liked carrying things more than using them. That word, daughter, hung in the air longer than it should have. She didn't say more, and I didn't ask. But suddenly, I could imagine her walking back to a house that wasn't empty, not really. Except her eyes, the way they lingered on the window instead of the street, told a different story. I thought about saying something, about asking the kind of question you only ask when you want to be let in. But instead I folded the edge of my napkin again, too aware of my own hands. She noticed. You're younger than I thought. Is that a bad thing? I asked, more defensive than I meant. No, she shook her head. Just, surprising. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't something I wanted to leave either. It was the kind of silence that made your chest feel tight, like there was too much air and not enough room for it. Her phone buzzed on the table. She turned it face down without looking. Don't you need to get that? I asked. Not right now. Her eyes found mine then, steady and unblinking. I felt the pull of it in my throat, like swallowing wrong. I imagined us outside this café. Running into her in the grocery store aisle, both of us pretending we didn't shop alone. Passing her on the street and knowing I'd stop even if I was late. I imagined her daughter, my age, maybe, walking in and seeing us like this. The thought made my stomach twist. She reached for her thermos, then paused. Her fingers brushed mine on the table, light as a question. She didn't pull back right away. It's cold today, she said quietly, like that explained the touch. But we both knew it meant something else. I thought it might be easier after that day, the brush of her hand, the excuse of cold weather. Like the moment would dissolve if we ignored it. But it didn't. If anything, it made the silences sharper, like we were both waiting for the other to slip. One morning, I got there before her. Sat at the window seat she always took. I don't know why, habit, curiosity, some small rebellion. When she arrived, she stopped short. Her eyes flicked from me to the chair, then back. For a second, I thought she might turn around and leave. But she didn't. She just set her book down and sat across from me. You're early, she said. So are you. We let that hang there, the obviousness of it. She folded her scarf, smoothed it once, then left it on her lap. Her hands were restless, and I realized I was gripping my coffee too tight. The door chimed. A man I vaguely knew, an old classmate, maybe, came in, spotted me, and grinned. He lifted his chin like, hey, you here too? My instinct was to wave him off, but he was already approaching. Didn't know you were a cafe guy, he said, glancing at her, then back to me. His smile had a question in it. I stumbled. Yeah. Just, writing. She offered the man a polite nod, not much else. Her hand covered the book like she was hiding it. He said something else, small talk, filler, but I barely heard it. The whole time, I was hyper-aware of her silence. Of the fact that someone else could see us sitting here together. When he finally left with his latte, she didn't look at me. Just stared at her thermos. You should probably tell people you're here with me, she said softly. Before they start guessing things. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. What would they guess? She finally met my eyes. The answer was there, even if she didn't speak it. I shifted, tapping the notebook against the table. You ever think people notice more when you're quiet than when you're loud? That earned me the smallest curve of her mouth, but not quite a smile. We sat there longer than usual. I watched her thumb run along the rim of her cup, slow, absent. I wanted to reach over, to still her hand. To feel what it would be like if she didn't pull away. But then the barista dropped something behind the counter, a sharp clatter. We both flinched. She drew her hands back into her lap, as if caught. I should go, she said. Right. Yeah. Neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavy, like something pressing down. I leaned forward, just slightly, enough to notice she didn't lean back. Her eyes, steady, unblinking, held mine too long. I thought, this is it. Then she exhaled, turned her head toward the window. Not rejection, not acceptance. Just pause. We left at the same time but walked in different directions. I saw her outside the cafe before I stepped in, sitting on the bench by the corner, scarf pulled loose, hair caught in the breeze. For once, the book wasn't with her. Just her thermos, balanced on the edge of the bench like it might fall. She looked tired. Not just from the morning. From something heavier. I hesitated at the door, then walked over instead. You're skipping your spot today, I said. She glanced up. Felt crowded in there. Her voice was steady, but her eyes didn't quite match. I sat beside her, careful not to brush against her coat. The thermos wobbled, so I reached out and steadied it. My hand lingered a second longer than it should have. You okay? I asked. She gave a small laugh, but it sounded more like air leaving a balloon. I shouldn't be here with you. That landed between us like a confession. My throat tightened. Because of your daughter? I asked before I could stop myself. Her head snapped toward me, surprise flashing, then softening. You remember. You mentioned her once. I shifted. I don't forget things like that. Her eyes dropped to her hands, fingers twisting the scarf in her lap. She's older than you, you know. I felt the heat climb my neck. That doesn't, I stopped. Because it did matter. To her, maybe to me too. Silence stretched. The kind that made you hear your own pulse. She said finally, sometimes I catch myself waiting for you to walk in. Like it's part of my day now. And then I hate myself for it. It was raw. Quiet, but raw. I wanted to say something, anything, that would make the air lighter. Instead, I stared at the street, at the way the leaves skidded across the pavement. You don't have to hate it, I said, low. She didn't answer. I turned to her, found her watching me, eyes wet but not breaking. What do you think this is? She asked. Not accusing. Almost pleading. I swallowed hard. My hand flexed against my knee. I don't know. But I know I don't want it to stop. Her lips parted, like she might answer. Instead, she pressed them shut, shook her head slowly. A couple walked past us, laughing too loud, their shadows falling over the bench. We both looked away until they were gone. When the quiet returned, it felt like we were the only two left in the city. I shifted closer, just an inch. My shoulder almost touched hers. She didn't move away. For a moment, it felt like we were leaning towards something inevitable, something we couldn't take back. Her hand tightened around her scarf. My fingers twitched at my side. And then she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Don't make me choose." It stopped me cold. We sat there, side by side, with everything unsaid pressing against us. The next morning, her chair was empty. I told myself she'd be late. People have lives, errands, reasons. But the window stayed clear, and the book wasn't there, and the thermos didn't stand guard over the table. I stayed longer than usual. Finished my coffee for once. Kept glancing at the door every time it chimed. Nothing. The second day, the same. Third day, too. By the fourth, I didn't even pretend I was there for the coffee. I almost texted her, except I didn't have her number. All I had was the memory of her voice saying, "If you go now, you'll always wonder what if." And I wondered if she'd meant it as a warning, not an invitation. When she finally came back, it was like nothing had happened. Except she didn't sit at the window. She chose a seat near the back, away from the light. I hesitated, then walked over. "Thought you'd vanished," I said. She looked up, polite but distant. "I was busy." That was all. No smile. No tapping the chair. I stood there for a beat too long, waiting for her to change her mind. She didn't. So I sat at another table, close enough to see her, far enough to feel the gap. Halfway through my coffee, I noticed her scrolling her phone, thumb quick, tense. She wasn't reading her book. She wasn't even pretending. When she finally glanced my way, I tried a half-smile. She didn't return it. Later, outside, I caught up to her. "Did I do something?" I asked, softer than I intended. She slowed, then stopped. Her eyes were tired, and for a second I thought she might say nothing at all. "My ex called," she said finally. "He's back in town. Wants to see our daughter." It was the first time she'd given me more than fragments. A whole sentence, heavy enough to knock the air out of me. "I didn't know you," I started. "No," she cut in. "You didn't." We stood on the sidewalk, people moving past us like we weren't there. Her scarf tugged in the wind, and she held it close at her throat. "I can't," she trailed off, shaking her head. "This isn't simple." I wanted to tell her I understood, even if I didn't. That I wasn't asking for anything more than those mornings, those silences. But my mouth stayed shut. She stepped back, the space between us growing. "You're young. You'll find someone who doesn't come with all this, wait." Her voice cracked on the last word. I watched her walk away until she disappeared around the corner. That night, I wrote a message in my phone, "I don't care about the wait. I just want the mornings with you." I didn't send it. The screen went dark in my hand. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 weeks. The cafe felt hollow without her, same windows, same coffee, but the air didn't settle right. Then one evening, walking home, I noticed her porch light flicker on. She was outside, locking her front door, thermos in hand like always. I almost kept walking. Almost. But my feet slowed, then stopped at her gate. She looked up, startled. "You're out late." "So are you," I said. My voice cracked in the cool air. We stood there, the fence between us, neither moving. The street was quiet, just the hum of a distant car, the rustle of leaves. Finally, I said, "You disappeared." Her lips pressed tight, then loosened. "I had to. Things got complicated." "With your ex?" She nodded, gaze dropping. "And with you." The words landed heavy, but not cruel. Just honest. I shifted my weight, gripping the fence post. "You could have just said that." Her eyes lifted back to mine, tired but steady. "Would you have let me go?" I swallowed hard. The truth was no. Not really. She sighed, leaning against her doorframe. "I keep telling myself it's wrong. The age, my daughter, the timing. All of it." And then, she stopped, shook her head. "Then I see you and none of that matters. And that scares me." The air between us felt sharper than any argument could have been. I stepped closer to the gate, fingers brushing the metal. "I don't know what you want me to say." Her eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. "Say nothing. Say everything. Just, don't pretend this is nothing." That cracked something open in me. I laughed once, broken. "I've been trying to. Every day. But I can't walk into that cafe and not look for you. I can't drink my coffee without," I stopped, the words catching. "Without thinking it tastes wrong if you're not there." Silence. Only the sound of both of us breathing, uneven. She set the thermos on the step, rubbed her hands together. "You'll regret this one day." Me. Us. Maybe, I said. But I'll regret not trying more. Her shoulders dropped, like she'd been holding something too heavy. She stepped forward, to the edge of her porch. Close enough now that the porch light framed her face, softening the lines. You don't know what you're asking for, she whispered. I'm not asking for forever, I said. Just, for you. Right now. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she reached through the space between us, her hand brushing mine over the cold metal of the gate. Not a grasp, not a promise. Just contact. Her thumb pressed lightly against my skin. A simple touch, quiet but undeniable. Okay, she whispered. And that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a moment where we said, this is it, we're together now. It was slower, quieter. Like water filling a glass you didn't realize was empty. She started coming back to the café, not every day, but often enough that it felt like rhythm again. Sometimes she sat at the window, sometimes in the back. I didn't always join her, and she didn't always ask. But by the time the clock hit 8:47 a.m., one of us would look up, and the other would already be watching. We didn't talk about what it was. We didn't name it. But the silence between us stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like presence. One Saturday, she brought tea in her thermos and poured some into a paper cup for me. I didn't like it, too bitter, too sharp, but I drank half anyway. She noticed, smirked, and said, "You're terrible at hiding things." "Guess I'll stick to my coffee," I said. And she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. We began to see each other outside the cafe too. Small things, her asking me to carry a box inside, me fixing the loose latch on her gate. She never asked directly, it was always, "Do you mind?" or, "If you have a minute." I always had a minute. One evening, I found her on the same bench by the corner. The thermos beside her, unopened. She didn't say anything when I sat down. Just leaned slightly, enough that her shoulder brushed mine. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the light change. "You're still here," she said finally, as if she hadn't quite believed it until then. "Yeah," I said. "Still here." It wasn't a promise, not exactly. But it was enough. Weeks passed, and the edges of things softened. Her daughter came up in conversation sometimes, stories, memories. Her ex, not so much. I didn't press. She didn't owe me explanations. What mattered was that when the morning came, she often chose to spend it across from me. One day, I arrived late. The cafe was almost full, but the window seat was open. She had left her thermos on the table, a silent marker, "This place is taken." I sat down, and she slid her book toward me. "First line," she said. On the page was an underlined sentence, "If you go now, you'll always wonder what if." Her eyes met mine, steady, soft. "Not my words," she said. "But they fit." I smiled, tracing the underlined letters with my finger. "They do." And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to leave early. The coffee went cold, the morning stretched, and we stayed. Together.